Iceland is a tiny European nation with no shortage of ancient folklore. Weaved into the fabric of daily life on this island are legends of great sea monsters, cannibalistic witches, and trolls and elves that both excite and terrify the human mind. Join us in this video for a journey through the Icelandic ages as we discuss some of the island's most terrifying and unusual legends. But before we begin, if you're interested in early access to videos and live chats with the creator of Intrigued Mind, consider subscribing to our Patreon. Your support will greatly help us keep the channel producing more intriguing content. It is believed that the first inhabitants to reach Iceland were a contingency of Irish monks who ventured to the area sometime between the 7th and 8th centuries. However, according to the legends left behind by these holy men and later Viking settlers, the North Atlantic island had been home to a handful of mysterious groups and creatures for millennia. One legend you've likely heard of is the existence of a group of small humanoids known as elves. Outsiders tend to disregard the stories surrounding these little folk as nothing more than myths, but to around 80% of Iceland's population, they exist in fact. Icelandic elves are more commonly known as the Huldrfolk, or hidden folk. This mysterious group shares many of the same characteristics as humans, but are much smaller, thinner, and remarkably beautiful. In traditional fashion, they have families, grow old, and bury their dead once they pass on. They're fond of a good celebration and love to dance, drink, and party, especially during the Christmas period. In many regards, they live a life rather similar to humans. However, they have an array of unusual magical abilities that we do not. When desired, the Huldrfolk can appear and disappear at will. This explains why they're rarely spotted by humans. These elves have a strong connection to nature and choose to live in Iceland's isolated mountainous and forested regions. While the Huldrfolk are generally passive and prefer to hide and live away from human settlements, they can become malevolent in certain circumstances, especially if they feel threatened. The belief is so strong in these little people that houses and roads are often built around sites they're thought to inhabit. But if you were to ask a local, they would tell you the elves themselves are often the reason behind a building project being cancelled or rerouted. According to the stories, the hidden folk will cast spells, forcing machines to stop working, and people have reported unexplainable accidents that have led to injuries when working close to sites inhabited by the elves. Because of this, the government was forced to sign a Protection Act in 2012 to deter any building from taking place on sites associated with the hidden folk and their territories. Luckily for the people of Iceland, there are human mediums that communicate with the elves, which helps to keep everyone happy. While the elves are one of Iceland's better-known mythological beings, there are far more mysterious legends out there. One such story takes us to an icy lake where an ancient creature is said to live in the depths of its waters. The beautiful Lake Lagarfleot lies in the far eastern part of Iceland. This body of water is technically a river fed from the Vatnajökull glacier and flows out to the icy North Atlantic Ocean. The surrounding region is a beautiful sight to behold and a popular tourist destination for those seeking to explore the isolated wilderness. However, locals speak of a legend that may deter you from ever setting foot in the lake, for within the deep dark waters of Lagarfleot lies a terrifying monster known as Lagarfleotsormor, or the Lagarfleot worm. According to local legend, once upon a time, a young girl was gifted a golden ring by her mother. Upon receiving the precious item, the child asked her mother how she might make the most of this gift, to which the mother replied, "Well, if you put a worm on any gold item, it will begin to grow." So, excited about the possibility of increasing the size of her ring, the young lady went in search of the perfect worm for her project. Eventually, she came across one not too far from Lake Lagarfleot. After picking up the worm, she locked it in a chest with the golden ring, hoping that her present would double in size after a few weeks. But upon returning to inspect the ring, what the little girl found terrified her, for it was the worm who had grown and now resembled a small snake. Shocked, the little girl dragged the chest to the lake and dumped it inside, hoping to never see the creature again. However, this would only be the beginning of the story. Since that day, the worm has grown to such a terrifying size that many locals avoid going anywhere near the lake. Locals have recorded sightings of the creature and claim the Lagarfleotsormor is now an enormous sea creature that preys on all kinds of wildlife. On the coldest winter nights, it is said the serpent can be seen slithering through the mist that lies on the water's surface. According to a story passed on by locals living close to the lake in 1589, the snake raised its hump so far above the water that a ship could have easily sailed under it. When the serpent dropped its body back down to the icy waters, the impact was so explosive that the earth trembled. To this day, sightings of the enormous creature are well documented, with one bystander claiming to have captured the serpent on video back in 2012. If you'd rather avoid a dip in this water for fear of being eaten alive, Being on land in Iceland doesn't necessarily guarantee your safety, not when the troll Grýla is around. Trolls may be one of the most terrifying aspects of Icelandic folklore. According to legends, these humanoid monsters inhabit the island's mountainous regions and only leave their abodes when foraging for food. The horrid and vicious creatures are known for their human-eating tendencies. When it's time to hunt for food, they will patiently await innocent hikers and passers-by before luring them into their caves for a hideous reason, to feast on their flesh. One of the most dreadful members of this group is a witch known as Grýla. She ventures down from her isolated lair during the weeks around Christmas in search of not only humans, but naughty children, as it is this flesh that she desires the most. Legends describe her as a giant ogre with hoofed feet and horns extending from her forehead. During the darkness of winter's night, this horrid creature will creep around human settlements, awaiting the right moment to strike, snatching children away with one swipe of her eerily long arms. Trolls are known for their particular magical abilities, and Grýla is no different. Legend states that she has a sharp sense of hearing that allows her to detect children over a mile away. Stories of this gruesome character imply that this malevolent giantess is hundreds of years old, and no matter how many children she devours over the years, it never satisfies her hunger. Grýla has grown to have one of the most terrifying reputations. This has forced mothers to keep their children far from her supposed home in the Dimmuborgir lava fields during the winter months. This famous volcanic formation is known as the Gateway to Hell, a fitting name for the home of one of their most horrifying trolls. The legends centered on Grýla are enough to scare any child to sleep during the winter months, but not all Icelandic folklore is centered on malevolent beasts. In fact, one legend speaks of 4 great spirits who watch over the land. A large portion of the Icelandic population are followers of the Evangelical Lutheran Church. People look to this Christian establishment for guidance and protection during times of hardship. But, according to the nation's folklore, this is not the only protective force on the island. Landwights are a group of spirits that have watched over Iceland since the first settlers arrived there. According to folklore, there are 4 of these protective wights: the Griffin of the North, the Dragon of the East, the Mountain Giant of the South, and the Bull of the West. While it may seem unusual that ancient Icelandic peoples put their faith in such a force, one story suggests the wights were able to hold off an invasion from a famous Danish king. Harald Bluetooth had intended to take Iceland and incorporate the island into his kingdom during the 10th century. But to do so, he would first need to find out how dangerous the island's population was, and whether or not they could hold off an invasion. So, he called upon his best wizard, who would go and spy on the inhabitants and report back with his findings. In order to get close to Iceland, the warlock would disguise himself as a whale. So, off he set, and within a day, he began to see the island in the distance. As the wizard approached the eastern shore, he immediately felt a strong protective force. He assumed this was nothing he couldn't handle. After all, the king was counting on him. So, the warlock continued on course and tried to come ashore at the eastern bay. Yet, as he did, out of nowhere, a ferocious dragon came down from the sky, accompanied by an army of lizards, snakes, and insects, each spitting a deadly poison at the wizard. Ultimately, this panicked the wizard and forced him to retreat to the ocean. Thinking this side to be cursed, he decided to approach the island from the south shore. But again, he felt the same presence as before, and upon touching the land on the southern coast, an army of giants standing taller than the tree line forced him to panic and retreat once again. However, the warlock was not ready to give up. He would attempt to come ashore twice more from the western and north shores. Yet, each time, his plan was foiled by the great protective force that watches over the nation. In the west, a great bull stopped him in his tracks, and to the north, a mighty eagle ensured he would not set foot on land. The elusive powers of the wizard were no match for the protective wights, and he would have to return to King Harald and explain his failure. To this day, the Icelandic population is certain that the protective spirits not only stopped an invasion from the Danish king, but continued to watch over the island and its inhabitants. Regardless of the opinions of outsiders, the Icelandic people strongly believe in the folklore of their island nation. So much so that even today, it continues to influence aspects of their everyday lives. The island's population avoids disturbing the homes of the hidden folk. They keep a close eye over their children during the Christmas period, and under no circumstances do they swim in the dark, icy waters of Lake Lagarfleot, all while believing that a group of protective spirits can ensure they remain free from harm's way. And that's the end of our video on the myths and legends of Icelandic folklore. For more videos on the most amazing forgotten parts of our history, be sure to subscribe to the Intrigued Mind channel, like the video, and leave your suggestions in the comments below.